It's now time for our newspaper review. Sally and I will take a look at what's making headlines in the papers around the world. Here's a quick selection for you.
Okay, well, let's start with what's on the front page of the business section of today's Daily Telegraph. It says Britain's banks face breakup if they don't fully separate their retail operations from their riskier investment banking businesses. That's the thinking of the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Banking woes of a different kind in Cyprus as the island threatens to become the next front in the Eurozone crisis. It could leave Germany in the unenviable position of bailing out Russian oligarchs who saw Cyprus as a haven for their cash.
El Pais's scoop alleging a secret slush fund for Spain's governing party is still dominating their front page. Opposition parties are demanding Prime Minister Rajoy resign.
Britain's Times reports on efforts by the Prime Minister David Cameron to win over rebel Conservative MPs ahead of a landmark vote on gay marriage. In the opposite corner, the Archbishop of Canterbury will begin his first day on the job by urging that marriage should be between a man and a woman.
The Financial Times reports that more than 5 centuries after Richard III's death, new battle lines are being drawn over where his final burial place should be. If bones found in a car park in Leicester turn out to be his, archaeologists will make an announcement on that today.
And we'll find out who knows his or her history in just a moment. And The Independent pays tributes to the inventor of the Etch sketch, who passed away in Paris at the age of 86 after more than 100 million of the creative toys were sold worldwide.
I had one of those, did you?
Likewise.
Did you have one, Rolake?
No, I didn't.
There you go.
Joining us for our newspaper review is Rolake Akinkugbe, who is the head of energy research at EcoBank. Nice to see you on the program.
Hi, nice to be
Okay,
here.
so start with the Daily Telegraph, and it's a big day for banks in Britain. The Chancellor is expected to announce the big banking reforms, and I suppose the key is that banks are going to be forced, they're going to be literally forced to break up their investment and retail banking sections. If not, I mean, the government actually steps in.
Yeah, and that's a big if. I mean, this story is quite interesting because in the aftermath of the financial crisis and with the various banking scandals, there's been sort of a global move towards banking reform. And George Osborne seems to be taking the bull by the horns. He's essentially saying you need to separate and ring-fence your retail business, your domestic, everyday transactions business, from your riskier investment banking business. And part of the rationale behind that is this idea that you can jeopardize account holders and depositors' funds if you don't do this. Now, people are saying, well, he's under a great deal of political pressure, given the tide of scandal and allegations about all sorts of rate rigging in the banking sector. But it remains to be seen. I mean, these are very strong words he's using. But the key opposition to this is the British Bankers Association, who are saying this will threaten investment and create a lot of uncertainty in the system.
I guess, you know, from everybody's point of view, the general public, they can remember the cues around Northern Rock Bank and the fear that set in when we thought that bank might collapse. And it's sort of the situation, isn't it, where the government had to bail out several banks. Yeah. And it's that kind of, what can we do to make sure this never, ever, ever happens again?
Well, obviously he's under pressure because he needs to be seen to be doing something. And this is really the year of banking sector reform. We've seen all sorts of, there's also a new legislation which might come out to allow people to switch between bank accounts quite easily. So there's obviously clearly political pressure.
But has the culture changed? Because the Chancellor's also been speaking about the culture in banking that led to the crisis, and this is just part of the general process, but has the culture itself within the industry
Well, I
changed?
don't know, it's quite difficult. You know, how long will it take the culture to change? Part of the problem now is actually investment banking operations in many banks in the bulge brackets actually shrinking. So the question is, will this ring fencing actually make much of a difference to what is already downsizing in the sector?
Now, talking of crises, let's look at what's going on as far as Cyprus is concerned. And this is quite an interesting take on the situation in Cyprus, International Herald Tribune, because it's basically looking at the fact that it says German officials said they would save the Eurozone at all costs, but they probably didn't realise that by doing that, they would be helping out Russian oligarchs who put a lot of money in Cyprus quite some time ago.
I know, Cyprus is the next front in the battle for the Eurozone, and I don't know whether Angela Merkel will be forced to eat her words. The irony is that Cyprus is only 0.2% of the Eurozone. And the question is whether Cypriot politicians themselves want to take on potential money from the troika of lenders that could possibly bail it out because of the same levels of austerity. But hidden behind this is the fact that actually the Russian government since 2011 has been bankrolling the Cypriot economy. And so there's a real conundrum here for Angela Merkel, particularly giving domestic pressure from German taxpayers.
And it's an election year for her, so she has to play it right at home as well as within the Eurozone. It's quite a tricky time for her.
It's absolutely...
I suppose the challenge of bailing out Cyprus is one thing, but then the possibility of bailing out, possibly, as the paper describes it, Russian oligarchs or gangsters, as the paper refers to them, the ones who are willing to lend. One has doubts as to whether she'd be willing to do that.
Now, talking of the Eurozone crisis, let's look at Spain now. Socialists demand Prime Minister to resign after more slush fund details emerge. Just tell us a little bit about what this scandal is all about for those who haven't got the detail on it, the claims that are out there.
Well, this allegation is something that was picked up by two local papers, El País and El Mundo, who claim that senior members of the Populist Party, Mariano Rajoy's party, had received funds over a few years, and even before Rajoy himself became prime minister. And the opposition party is essentially saying that is a sign of a corrupt government and putting pressure on him to resign. Now, the thing is, not since, I think, the mid-'80s has the opposition ever called for the resignation of an incumbent, and it just adds to his headache. The question is, at a time when there are austerity measures in Spain, is the government seen as above board in terms of its financial dealings? And I suspect there will be pressure for Rajoy and his inner circle to come clean and actually provide a great deal more transparency on this allegation.
Well, the Prime Minister has denied all the allegations at this point, but I think it becomes even more difficult when papers like El País and others have published the ledgers from former treasurers of the party that his name is there. How, you know, there's a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah, there needs to be some sort of investigation.
OK, we'll keep an eye on that one, that's for sure. That won't go away for some time. Now the Times, front page, looking at Tory gay marriage rebels told you're out of touch. The pressure being put on those Conservative MPs who are not in favour of allowing gay couples to get married here in the UK. And, of course, it's a huge debate. And in the Telegraph, there's an article about the Archbishop of Canterbury starting his first day at work, and he's actually going to say very openly that he's for the opposite, that marriage in church should be between a man and a woman.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a baptism of fire for Justin Welby, the new Archbishop, but what could potentially be cataclysmic for David Cameron here is actually if those rebels succeed in their goals, there's going to be a lot of debating and talks today around supporting the Prime Minister. I mean, up to 180 members are potentially threatening to vote against the bill or abstain for voting, including some cabinet members and party whips. So this could basically be quite serious for the Conservative Party if they can't find some sort of unity around the issue.
It's interesting, actually, because this very issue is causing a lot of concern in other places. France, we've seen a lot of demonstrations in France where they're trying to change the law there as well on similar levels.
Yeah, certainly. It remains to be seen.
Let's move on to the Financial Times, and not talking about numbers this time around, but a bit of history and archaeology. And for those who like Shakespeare, it's all mixed in there. The Battle of Bosworth.
Yeah, that's near Leicestershire. Absolutely.
Okay,
It
well
all
done.
happened in our... That's where I'm from, you see. Hands up, I'm a Leicestershirean.
Okay.
You are?
If that exists.
So
But
you must be very interested in
Well, yeah, it's a big deal for Leicester. But Rolake, are you excited by this? Are you desperate to find out
I
if it was
just want to
him?
know whose skull is it. I hope this issue can finally be laid to rest. But this is Richard III, who, you know, depending on how you view him, sort of, is he the hero or the villain, you know? This is today. Results of this DNA test will be made known. And this skull was found buried under a car park in Leicester. Leicester could potentially become the next big tourist attraction in the UK. But it'd be interesting to see what comes of this.
Well, supporters of Richard III,
that's for sure.
supporters of Richard III argue that Shakespeare was part of a smear campaign against him.
Really?
Characterizing him as this villain, when actually maybe he was a rather decent fellow. Well, we'll never know.
Maybe.
We can move on to Etch a Sketch. The inventor, Andre Cassagnes, has passed away at the age of 86. I had one, you had one, Rolake didn't have one.
I did have one, but it made a really good present.
It looks like,
it's a
dare I say
fantastic
it,
invention.
It looks like a tablet, doesn't it? The first ever tablet computer, maybe?
The pioneering tablet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you think about it.
You should have
Sally,
seen my
our
sketches.
Kids, our
They were
kids would laugh
fantastic.
if they saw the kind of toys we played with.
I think they've probably had one of these, actually.
Yeah,
mine.
and
I
he
dusted
certainly made history,
Dusted it off from the loft.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our newspaper review. Rolake Akinkugbe, head of energy research at Ecobank. Thanks for coming in and joining us for the newspaper review. And that's it from Sally and from me.
That is indeed. Stay with us here on BBC News. Plenty more to come in the hours ahead. We'll see you soon.